We started the TECnology Hall of Fame last year to recognize a lot of important, but perhaps in some cases forgotten audio innovations, and more recent ones that have had a lasting impact on the development of audio.
What's going on out there on the floor in these sessions is cutting edge, up-to-date, new technology thrusting forward. But everything that's out there has a history, and that's what we mustn't forget. We mustn't forget our roots and where we came from, and I'm really pleased to see that the Tech Hall of Fame is doing exactly that.
Edwin Armstrong was a student. He came up with an actual physical use for a vacuum tube and came up with the regenerative feedback circuit. And the regenerative feedback circuit was immediately applied to radio and allowed radio to have much better depth, much better sound quality. He later followed that with a super heterodyne circuit in 1918. And then eventually he came up with this great idea for FM radio. Western Electric / Bell Labs came up with a recorder in 1925, invented by Henry Harrison and Joseph Maxfield, that actually had a bandwidth out to 6K. The important thing about electric recording was this: finally, there was a need to use a microphone in the recording chain. There was a need for amplifiers in the recording chain. And since you had an amplifier driving a cutter head through a microphone, a vocalist like Bing Crosby, who are known as crooners, could sing very softly in the microphone. And all of that would be captured on the record. And it was a complete revolution. And anyway, today we are lucky enough to have Mr. Richard Cox here from AT&T, who will accept an award, slightly late award here for electrical recording. And you never did any acoustic recording, did you?
No, didn't do any of this myself. Can't claim credit. I'm proud to be here on behalf of AT&T to accept the award.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
The development of the ribbon microphone in 1931 was a huge breakthrough, but compared to the dynamic microphones of the time, and even the condenser mics at the time, this mic was an absolute revolution. It continues to today. Altec Lansing 604 duplex speaker, the wonderful coax. I think that the actual sensitivity on this was about 108 decibels for a 1 watt input, which in 1944 they had crappy power amps, and this thing was the answer. And it instantly became a classic in recording studios as a monitor. Later in the 80s, it became the basis for the entire Yuri series, based on the same driver combination with a alternate horn. They called it an active program equalizer because what it was is it was a 3-band filter set based on a Western Electric design. This is still an amazing thing and still widely copied. The people are still looking back at the Pultec, making copies of Pultecs, making copies of the early Western Electric filters designs, which is an amazing testament to a product that's 54 years old. What you're seeing here is a Neumann, a Cam 84, wonderful microphone from 1966, which actually was the first microphone to use phantom power. Amazing, amazing development that all of us owe a gratitude to today.
We would like to thank the Tech Hall of Fame very much, and on behalf of Neumann and its employees worldwide, I am honored to accept this award. Thank you. Thank you, George.
Thank you very much.
What can I say? We got the Tech Award Hall of Fame last night. The only thing I can say is I thank Mix Magazine and the readers of Mix Magazine for everything they do for us, the way they support us. The audio industry is a big family, and I'm proud to be a member of this family, and I hope that this will continue for many, many years in future. And well, I'm just happy to be here tonight.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you created a custom parametric equalizer for ITI console. If you want a really good parametric equalizer, you should buy one from Mr. George Massenberg, who makes really better ones now. Mr. George Massenberg.
I take this very seriously. I'm humbled and honored, and I don't know what to say, but I would like to acknowledge the work of Robert Mushaw, my collaborator on it, who is now head of new computing technologies for the National Security Agency. Needless to say, he went somewhere where he could actually apply his talents. And I would like to accept this award in the name of geeks of every age and color who have an idea and build something and then have to try to sell it to an industry that really doesn't want to hear it. Because as hard as this was to put together, and it really took quite an effort to put it together, because it was not so much the topology, it was the fact that we had to invent an op-amp to go along with it that was good enough for audio. It wasn't so much that, it was selling it that was really, really tough, and something that we have to do with new technologies every day. I'll let it go at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Here's a guy who put synthesis on the map. Created the mini Moog. Well, he created the modular Moog first, and it was this horrible beast. So he, in 1970, he came up with this idea. He said, wow, what we really need to do is take the really cool modules from the most popular modules from the modular Moog, put them in this little compact system with actual knobs instead of those damn patch cords, and sell it. He said, this is going to be great. Musicians are going to want this. He showed it, unveiled it at the AES show in 1970. Bob Moog was diagnosed with brain cancer about 8 months ago, and he's not with us now.
On behalf of Bob, I want to thank the Mix Foundation and the Tech Awards and George, of course, the Conservatory for this honor. Bob would have been pleased that this award was done in conjunction with the Audio Engineering Society, which really gave him the platform for his unlikely start in this business almost 50 years ago. Of course, Bob would have also been quick to recognize the fact that he was part of the design team, but by no means the only contributor to the Model D. He'd give you the names of the folks who were critical to the development of the Model D Mini Moog, and he would take full responsibility for all the screw-ups that occurred in Model A, B, and C, and ultimately led to the renowned Model D. In my experience, that's how he would have handled this evening. But tonight I'd like to share with you what I know about that time from the time that I spent with Bob talking to him about it. And I can tell you that he was pissed that just about the time it appeared that the Model D was a commercial success, he had to sell controlling interest in his company and his name to a venture capitalist who later sold it to Norland, who later went bankrupt. Mind you, this is no slam on venture capital, they have their place. No, what I want to share with you is that when I met Bob, he recognized that maintaining financial control also meant maintaining creative control of his company. And we were determined not to repeat the mistakes that occurred in 1971. And I can tell you that the day we talked about this, Moog Music was a company making a profit with cash assets to its name. And I can tell you that he told me with rare, raw emotion, Mike, I've never worked for a successful company before. So, was Bob proud of the Model D? You're damn right he was. Would he be proud of this award? Absolutely. Bob was a genius, never to be replaced, forever will be missed. He touched thousands, if not millions, of lives, and these are the facts. The other facts are these: the company and Bob was never more popular than it has been the last couple of years. And the only thing we can say is that he had more to give, and for that I'm pissed. I wish he could have seen what he could have done with the support team that we have in place at Moog Music today. We're really just hitting our stride. I want to personally thank you for your support and know that the current Moog Music can always count on each and every one in this room to continue that support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Actually, I should end the Bob Moog thing on a kind of a fun moment where we honored Bob Moog in 1993 at the Tech Awards. And it was given out by Mark Mothersbaugh of Devo. And as soon as he was standing there in a suit looking very calm, and as soon as Bob walked up on the stage, Mark Mothersbaugh drops to his knees and, oh, I'm not worthy. And there was Bob going, okay. He was worthy, absolutely. In 1976, when Dolby Well, first developed the technology for a film that was released in Dolby Stereo. Suddenly it opened stereo, theater, multi-channel sound to the masses. Every 35 millimeter print in every single movie theater in the world could be fully Dolby compatible. And if you wanted a stereo playback, it was there. The other secret about it is when you would encode a matrix Dolby stereo RT-LT soundtrack with your 4 tracks, with the four soundtracks encoded on a two-channel sound stream. That also meant that every video cassette that was stereo that ever was released also was pre-matrixed for Dolby playback and multi-channel sound, which in the early 80s led to an interest in home theater and home theater playback systems. Johan Allen from Dolby Labs is here. He's the guy who actually did all the work, so.
I should acknowledge Alan Blumlein from 1934, who was the first person to actually use a matrix for film sound. He did it vertically and horizontally, not using surrounds at the back, but he had phase as the vertical indicator and amplitude as the horizontal one, 1934. Also Eric Rohrback-Maidson, erstwhile chief engineer at Bang & Olufsen, who showed me the delights of using a delay line to suppress crosstalk, which is really what made this whole thing possible. And finally, Ray Dolby, whose noise reduction, of course, was a sine qua non of film sound and made the extension of the bandwidth and lowering of distortion possible. Streisand's production company came to us in the spring of 1976 and said A Star Is Born will be released in December. I said we'd like to release it in Dolby Stereo, which at that time simply meant 3 channels behind the screen without surround. First artist said to us, you can only do it if you can do it with surrounds. So we panicked. The engineering department did nothing very much. We thought, well, December's a long way away. We got to about October when I realized there was not going to be a product, but we had an idea about how to do it. So I bought half a dozen Eventide clockwork delay lines and half a dozen Sansui QS decoder boxes. And we got some bud boxes and put in filters and another layer of Dolby B-type noise reduction and actually qualified. We had 6 theaters in the US equipped. By the following May, we had a couple of hundred theaters equipped ready for Star Wars, which by that time we had a real product and things moved on. But back in 1976, at the time of the release of A Star Is Born, if somebody had said, we will be releasing 17,000 movies with this soundtrack format, I would have said, what have you been smoking? Thank you very much, thank you. Thanks.
It's funny, almost 30 years later, this machine remains the holy grail for 2-track mastering. Unfortunately, Ampex is gone. You know, they don't exist except for in the mind of Mike Spitz, who will, of course, sell you a refurbished one all fixed up to beautiful specs with new electronics and great performance. This was an amazing machine, and our committee thought it was appropriate, and I absolutely agree that this is one of the great tape recorders of all time, the Ampex ATR 102. If you think about the state of computers in 1979, it was pretty grim. And for Fairlight to come out with an actual musical instrument based on a computer that could do sampling and sequencing, even though it was 8-bit and it stored audio on floppy drives, it really laid down the foundation for Fairlight for years to come. And they're celebrating their 30th anniversary this year. So the Fairlight CMI is definitely worthy of this award.
Thank you. I'd like to point out that earlier we had the Victor in 1925, the bandwidth of 7 kilohertz, is that right?
6K.
6K. Well, it's not, the Fairlight in 1979 was about the same.
It's better now.
It's much better now. Anyway, I'd like to thank iTech and Mix for this award. It's very honourable to be mentioned in such famous names as Bob Moog and Massenberg. Thank you very much indeed.
Here's a guy with a stroke of a circuit board, pretty much destroyed the music industry. This is the first sampled programmable drum machine, and it was absolutely a revolution. It came out, put thousands of drummers out of work, some rightly so. Others became what is known as drum machine programmers. So they were guys who knew how to go like this and hit save, and they said, oh, you're hired. And the drum machine absolutely changed the whole music industry overnight. He later developed the MPC series of beatboxes for Akai. And now he's doing a very cool analog processor called Adrenaline. We're here live with Roger Lynn, who is the man behind the LM1, the first programmable digital drum machine. How exactly did that thing come about?
I had been in recording, working with metronomes, which allow you to wipe the drums after the initial basic track. And I thought it would be good to have something that was a better sounding drum machine.
Rather than just a click.
Exactly, rather than just a click. I also had my home studio, and I could play some guitar and some drums and bass, but drums were always the hardest thing to play and to record for me. So I, with my computer, started writing a program to make programmable drum beats, and it basically just evolved from there. My focus was always on pulling some sort of art out of this box, and ultimately the idea of being able to take sound in and manipulate it at its fundamental level was very, very exciting for me. But more appropriately, what new ideas artistically it could pull out of a musician's head. You know, when Hendrix used a wah-wah pedal, it affected the way he played, or Clapton did. They really affected the art more than just changing the sound. Being able to have a drummer that was not only playing continuously, so you could just jam as long as you want, but also somebody who always kept really steady time. If I look back now and I see perhaps what influences the machines had on music, I think that it really changed the nature of music. It created whole new grooves that people really embraced in making hip hop and the rap tunes and of course the other popular music that we had talked about earlier in the 80s. It just happened to catch on at the right time and be very popular. I knew it was something that I would want to use, and my primary motivation was necessity, the mother of invention.
Dave Smith. He was the founder of Sequential Circuits and created the first programmable multi-synthesizer, a thing called the Prophet 6, which was a great classic in its own time and still is. 1983 finally demonstrated how one of his sequential synthesizer models could control a Roland module, and the MIDI revolution was born. We're casually sitting here in a coffee house in Berkeley where we caught up with Dave Smith. So that was you with the first programmable polyphonic synthesizer.
Yeah, it was the first instrument that had a microprocessor in it, first musical instrument. The first polyphonic, completely programmable synthesizer. I kind of took the initiative and worked with a couple of my engineers, and we developed what we called the Universal Synthesizer Interface, and wrote up a spec, and it was meant to be a starting point. And then I gave a talk in the, I think it was 1981, at the New York AES convention, and that was kind of what's pointed at as the first starting point for MIDI. And we actually started shipping the Prophet 600 in December of '82. That was the first MIDI instrument in the world. And then a month later, Roland brought out the JP6, I think it was. I always forget which one it was. They brought it over to our booth, and we had the Prophet 600, and we got a MIDI cable, and it worked.
So are you surprised that MIDI is still with us now, almost 25 years later?
I'm kind of surprised it's still version 1.0. Name one other thing that's lasted that long that's still version 1.0. And it's used everywhere, every day, in every music studio. I mean, it's just, it's amazing how, and of course, MIDI. All those obnoxious ringtones we all have to listen to, General MIDI.
General MIDI tones,
so it's in billions of installations now.
1985 was still a very, very early day for PC. A couple of ex-Tektronix engineers got together and created a new company called Audio Precision to make the absolute best in test tools. And if you go to any manufacturer anywhere in the world, any country in the world, you will find an AP test set in there. The Audio Precision really, even 20 years later, it's still pretty much the standard. When this thing first came out in 1995, the idea of a $10,000 8-bus console with 24 analog inputs and 40 inputs on remix was just amazing. And I always felt that the most amazing feature of this, it had onboard signal processing and full automation and moving fader automation and such. I always thought the most amazing feature of this product was a cascade port on the back, where you could use a single cable and cascade 2 of these and have an 80 input fully automated digital console for $20,000. This is it. This is the classic. This is the one that really laid down the laid down the basis for everything that followed from not only from Yamaha but for other manufacturers to copy. So I see Mr. Showers here.
Thank you very much.
Want to say something?
No, thank you on behalf of everybody at Yamaha. Thank you very much. There's a lot of work that goes into these consoles, and lots of folks that aren't here today to take credit for a lot of hard work, but we certainly have a lot of children from the O2R.
Absolutely.
Thank you, George.
Over here.